like how he immediately finds the next defender to look off. You'll see this at the safety position a lot. He passed the linebacker. He'll find a safety, try to look those guys off. He always has someone that he's selling his eyes to. He's not just using head movement to use it. There's always a reason that he's using the head movement that he used to kind of shake guys. And he typically finds a target, kind of locks onto him, and tries to shake those players out of their position. He's had some nasty reps because of that, which finds a lot of success. Detroit Lions ended their 2025 NFL draft at pick number 244 with wide receiver Dominic Lovett out of Georgia. And today, we're going to dive into the player, so let's get it started. So yes, today we're going to be diving into Dominic Lovett, the receiver out of Georgia, one of the 4 day 3 picks the Lions made, where it felt like they walked away with a ton of value on day 3. It was probably my favorite day of any of the days of draft picks. This was a fascinating day. The Lions ended up adding, for me, a lot of players that I had higher than where they actually went in terms of the other players available at their position. But one guy that I didn't do a ton on was Dominic Lovett before the draft. So today, perfect opportunity to dive into this entire past season for Lovett and what I think he can bring to the table for the Lions. But all of the little factors of his game, of the person, of the player the Lions drafted, all seem to fit what the Lions are typically after. So this just makes a ton of sense. The 5'10", 185-pound receiver that transferred from Missouri for the 2023 season, that the first 2 years he spent with the Tigers, had a breakout season in the second year, 56 receptions, over 800 yards, 3 touchdowns that year, outproduced Luther Burden, who was a freshman at that time, transfers over to Georgia, looking for an opportunity to kind of step it up a notch, if you will. And in practice, it was early reporting that, okay, the conditioning, the practice at that time, it was a challenge for him, but he was immediately productive on the field. Didn't have any massive seasons, but he was productive immediately for the Georgia Bulldogs. Got on the field quickly, was effective in their short passing game. He was huge. Kirby Smart spoke very highly about him early on with Georgia and the value that he was able to add underneath. And then, of course, we also get that special teams value where he played the gunner position on punt team. Anaya Smith on the opposite side, they were incredibly successful together. I think he's a fantastic gunner. Just let me throw that out at the beginning here. I think he's going to have a lot of that impact at the next level immediately. That's where he can kind of find his role. From a testing perspective, at 5'10", 185 pounds, he tested out pretty well, especially in terms of the speed with a 4.4 flat. The 33.5 inch vertical is fine. The 10.00 broad jump, we didn't get 3 cone, but what we did get is some great quotes. And I found these quotes when watching Dominic Lovett from this past season. And the 2 quotes that stuck with me for him was, number 1, make the quarterback right, and number 2, no bad balls. Okay, the quarterback throws no bad balls, and let's make the quarterback right. That was his mentality as a pass catcher, as a receiver. And I think it starts to shine a lot when you get some of the toughness, the way that he plays through traffic. Then you also get the ability to track the football in the air, to find the football, to be impactful late on plays, to just find a way to be an impact piece as a blocker as well. While he's not the most dominant blocker, he's not as dominant as Tesla felt, he's a very willing blocker. His length helps him here, about 31.5-inch arms, which is pretty long for a guy at his size, just over 9-inch hands, so not massive hands, but he's got some real length to him. It shows up as a blocker, and just the willingness to step in, do the dirty work. And you could just tell when you watch him, like, this guy gets excited for his teammates. It's all about the team for him. That's the vibe that I got. That's what rubbed off on you when watching Dominic Lovett. So with all that being said, let's dive right into it. Let's talk about this receiver, and let's start with the ability to catch the ball. Let's start with the hands for Dominic Lovett. And this ended up being an average grade for me here. Now, statistically speaking, a few drops that are listed here, sometimes I don't think his hand technique is great. The ball getting away from his body leads to much more inconsistency as well than it does when it's on his body. There are a lot of elements that I like of his ability to track the football. Contested situations tend to be a little bit of an issue for him as well. So there's plenty of areas that I like here. I feel like if you could dial in more of the technique aspect, you could have much higher upside than where it currently is as a pass catcher, because he does catch a lot of things with his hands. We just need to kind of dial in some of the technical aspects here. But that being said, there are still a lot of things that you like. First off, he's a very reactive receiver, very reactive hands. He's got fast reactive hands, fast reactive body control to where the ball is. You'll see it on like tip passes, balls that get a little bit out of control, his ability to react to it, find a way to at least get his hand on the football. It's very noticeable. He also, to me, is a very aware player in the sense of he has great vision. He's constantly active with his eyes, finding the sideline, finding the middle of the field, finding openings. He's very active, eyes open type of vision. Very consistent pass catcher with his overhand technique, especially when it's more so on his body, right? When it's kind of in his frame and you can utilize the overhand technique, you do see some consistency there. He's a pretty soft-handed body catcher as well. Now, I was always taught body catching is okay, but obviously there's limitations to it. The biggest thing there will be probably the Lions trying to get it more so as hand usage rather than leaning on trapping it. But he's very smooth and patient when he's a body catcher. Same thing a little bit, maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, but when it's even an underhand pass catching technique in those spots as well, again, outside of the frame tends to lead to a few more issues that we're going to touch on here. Trying to finish on a sideline, trying to get the toe tap as well. Underhand hand placement tends to be a little bit of an issue technically for me as well, especially when he's trying to like save things off the ground, scoop things off the turf. You just get a little bit more trapping, I feel like, than actually soft hands. He doesn't feel like he has incredibly soft hands, especially when contested situations tend to kind of crank up. It's not that he's not willing to step in those spots and take big shots, because he does. Now, unfortunately, he takes a brunt of those shots. He doesn't really deliver shots as much as he's just like eating contact, but he's very willing to step over. It doesn't ever seem to be an issue for him to be in those situations where he knows he's going to get clocked when he makes the grab and he's soaring over the middle of the field. All little hops in his game that I don't love. At times it feels unnecessary, just like slight little hops where he's not always working and playing through the ground, which can also lead to some contested situation issues as well. Now, some of those contested, we could call them drops, weren't also just great passes either, so there is some reality to some of that when you watched him. He also has a issue of taking his eyes off the ball a little bit early. Now, I thought this actually cleaned up back towards the end of this last season with Georgia, but especially early in the season, taking the eyes off the ball a little bit early, specifically finding defenders around him, trying to be very reactive, trying to transition quickly, which is such a big element of his game, is to get the ball and go. Like I said, he started off doing so much of the quick concepts, RPO styled concepts for Georgia. That was his kind of a thing. Get the ball and get out. The problem is he would take his eyes off the ball just a tad early, kind of finding traffic around him. Never felt like a toughness issue, just felt like a lack of focus issue. The way that he spots up on broken plays, he's really good at making himself a target. He's disciplined as well. He settles down when he finds a lane. He sits there. He understands he's going to get hit. He doesn't tend to fade in zone openings as well once he finds those. So I love all of those aspects. He does run through the ball when he's working over the middle of the field routes, crossing routes, drags. He tends to run through the ball. Sometimes he gets him into some bad spots because he doesn't react soon enough or change his pace, or like, hey, I got to stop here. He's still trying to run through the ball that we can create run after catch. And I love that because he trusts himself and he trusts his hands. He trusts his ability, but it does put him in some bad spots occasionally when he's just a little bit too aggressive. Late patient hands when the ball is working up on his body, right? There's not a panic there. He can be very patient with his hands to get his hands up because he's so reactive. And that also screams some confidence just as a natural pass catcher when, again, the ball's on his frame, especially when he can go more so the overhand technique. There's just a little bit of a juggle to when he's consistently bringing the ball in, which is a problem. And that's where technically I think some things need to improve. The parts of the ball that he consistently catches isn't always great as well, where he actually gets up on the football. Sometimes I feel like that he doesn't always have his hands ready early enough, which could be a problem. Away from his body, he's not really a plucker. He definitely needs to get two hands on the football most of the time, right? Eventually, if he gets one hand on the ball, you don't really get much success there. He's not a plucker. He doesn't have big hands outside of his frame either, which definitely shows up. And again, his hands don't show up soft in those spots away from his body, or when he's attacking through contested situations, his hands don't tend to be soft. So he tends to kind of feel like he's trapping the ball consistently rather than kind of just letting it come in and showing really patience in those spots. Scoop technique that he can kind of work as an underhand pass catcher. You look out in some over shoulder passes.
Now, I will say I do love how fast he gets the ball to his body in contested spots to get the ball away from traffic.
He's closer to average. I do think there's areas to expand here. I think there's going to be some natural limitations, but the toughness and the contested aspect, which isn't great for me now, but the toughness in those spots, the way that he can track the football, leads to much more upside, which we'll get to later. Now, in terms of being able to create separation, I think that he's above average here. I think he's a little bit more than above average here. I think he's a little bit more than a plus ability to create separation. There's some knocks, again, that you may not improve, but he can really separate on all three levels. He did back in college, mainly level 1 and level 3. He did some vertical routes, pulled some coverage, ran some fades. Level 1, he did a lot of his work, so we got to see that kind of mix. I didn't think he attacked level 2 as often outside of like some deeper slants or occasional inbreakers, which weren't always the most consistent either. But he definitely attacked the first and third level with some effectiveness there. His route tree wasn't the most diverse, but it also wasn't just like he was running 3 routes. There was a little bit of diversity. There was a lot of whip routes underneath, slants, crossers, drags, mesh concepts, which could improve as well. Vertically, again, wasn't the deepest. We had some post routes. He had a lot of fades that were thrown in there. Some goal balls just to pull coverage. Then in the middle of the field, again, you had some inbreakers. You had some like flat routes that he would work, but not really like true speed out routes. So there's elements that I think could be added to this, but right now it's not the deepest route tree, but it's also not bare either. There is some diversity that gets thrown into there. For me, in terms of being able to separate, he's got very fast feet. When he stabs, he can go. He gets out of breaks really quickly. He's got really fast feet. His feet get going very quickly, which adds some suddenness.
You're going to hear me say unorthodox, but on this whip route, this is the example of his ability to make a route look like it's supposed to be, and then it's not. And right there, you get that 1-2, plant off your right foot, break inside, and he has that little subtle spin just to kind of pop outside. He didn't do that very much this past season, but it showed the looseness in his hips. I don't think he's overly agile, but this just showcased his ability at the top of the route to be very crafty.
Here we talk about the change of pace, the tempo to his routes. He plays with a lot of route tempo, but it's that adaptive change of pace and that ability to slow down, speed up. It becomes a very big problem. It creates some unorthodoxness to the way that he can actually actually create separation. But when he sticks routes, when he plants, when he's working more on a linear plane, he can be tough to deal with. He gets out of those breaks really quickly. He actually speeds up when he gets out of breaks. A lot of times you see just a real fire when he sticks and he gets upfield. So a lot more of the linear routes, you see a lot of burst working through those routes, working through those cuts. And then when you work in level 1, you'll see the footwork that can really work in great separation underneath, whether that's stepping in front of guys underneath on slant routes, whether it's working some of those whip routes and being very efficient with his footwork. Now, this can lead to some body control issues, as we'll touch on here, because he doesn't tend to play with as much sink or as much bend. I also don't think his ankle bend is fantastic either, which can lead him to breaking routes a little bit wider. His pad level doesn't drop as easily. So because of that, sometimes things will pop a little bit wider, which can be a little bit of a problem, but he's so efficient with his footwork that he'll utilize it in a little unorthodox of fashion, but it's so efficient, and he's got enough knee flexion where he can really kind of weave routes, can really kind of lean through some of those cuts. Again, some maybe more of the linear cuts. He can really lean through those with a lot of efficiency, and he's constantly cutting guys off. So there's a lot of upside in that sense in certain routes that you can get him on. He's constantly putting guys in stacked situations when you see him kind of work some of those vertical pushes or, again, those slant routes, constantly gets guys stacked early on plays, and then it's just about the ability to maintain it, which could be a little bit more hit and miss. But again, that less sink at the top of the route for me tends to be the biggest issue here. But there's a route tempo to really find a second gear as a route runner. This is second gear as a double move piece. It's not just like, hey, the 4-4 flat's good. Like, this guy can really roll, and because he changes the pace, you really feel kind of that vertical element that's added with also acceleration off the line of scrimmage, some of his speed release. When he wants to go, he can just get out and go, especially when he's free off the line of scrimmage. Struggles to kind of block out defenders. So you think about some of those underneath routes, he doesn't really wall off guys that well. He doesn't deal incredibly well with guys that are kind of in his hip with getting those guys off of him as the route kind of develops, unless, again, it's a little bit more linear. He can kind of snap it off with some burst. He doesn't do incredibly well working, especially underneath routes where it's a lot less complex and guys can kind of hang on him a little bit. You'll get guys that'll tend to hang on him in those spots. He doesn't really box out defenders that well. It's not his frame. That's not his game. So it allows the target zone to really be shrunk. And on top of that, he's not an elite contested pass catcher by any means. So leads to some problems there, but I love how he maintains speed when he's working through like those slant routes, when he's working through those cuts. He's got the vertical push speed to really open up guys' hips when he's working kind of those vertical stems specifically there. He's just very efficient with his footwork. He's efficient on his out cuts. You'll see it on the in cuts a little bit as well. He's got the hips to kind of cross over. There's some real hip looseness. You'll see this working man and zone coverage, the ability to weave through traffic, play really tight to defenders, open up spacing because of that. We'll talk about route running in a second, but I got to throw it up now because it just hit my mind. He's a very much so a team player as a route runner, in the sense that he's going to do his job to open up other guys. He understands prying open coverage for other pieces on the field. So he's not somebody that like, oh, I need the football. He'll run routes simply to get other guys open. And so against Alabama, his ability to just destroy oversets, he quickly gathers his feet at the top of the route. This allows him to snap off curls, hitches. He comes to a very quick gather, very efficient with his footwork. So even though he doesn't sink as incredibly well, you tie that to some of the vertical discipline that he also plays with his eyes, which is adequate, but he plays with a lot of vertical discipline early in his stem, though some of it gets to some issues by timing. But because of that, and you tie that together with his ability to quickly gather footwork at the top of the route and the pacing that he usually plays with, which allows him to be much more efficient in those spots, also can allow him to create at least average separation when kind of working back to the football specifically. And I think about that on some like those fast motion usages. You run him on like a deep curl down the field. Think about what Khalif Raymond would do for us, right? That's not going to be maybe his best element, but because of his speed, his vertical speed, the way that he changes pace, because he was used so much on motion, he's very good with spacing. He did so much fast motion work. He gets upfield very quickly that some of those routes, because of his effectiveness and his footwork and his sideline field there, you could potentially work him in some of those spots similar to what Khalif Raymond did as well. To me, he's got some loose body control. Again, allows him to weave. And issues that I have here is like, number one, I don't think his lateral movement lose a little bit of speed, right? And that can specifically show up a little bit more so working underneath, but he has real burst. Strides through his cuts, right? There's a very balanced setup to it at the top of the route that he strides through. This doesn't drop his weight incredibly well, so you'll see that also at times. Like, this can lead to some body control issues where he'll kind of lose balance because he's relying so much on his footwork. And again, without some of the great ankle bend, I think drags and crossers don't always hit the landmarks that you're looking for, so it puts him in some rough positions. It also causes extra footwork for him to cleanly get through some of those spots. So for me, I think that he has legitimate ability to create separation with some limitations attached, but he's in a solid spot here. Now, run after catch is weird because he did so much work after the catch, but I didn't love him. I just liked it, right? I think he's slightly above average in this category right now, with potential upside, with, again, some probably just limitations here as well. One is he could be more creative as a runner. I also think he could be a little bit more open vision, right, where he's not as tunnel vision, but I don't know how much this is actually going to improve with the ball in his hands. That being said, there's still a lot of good here, and mainly it comes back to the transition quickness, how fast he gets upfield. The acceleration is good. It's not elite, but it's good, but it's how fast he gets into that next spot. He's really a north and south runner with the ball in his hands, and that's usually something you think of with the running back, but that's how he is as a receiver. He gets the ball and he gets upfield, he gets positive yards. You're not going to have him dance around and go backwards. He's going to get upfield. He just may not get as much juice and electricity that you would be hoping to get consistently there. And what he does well is he plays angles really well. He's really good taking on single man angles. He can really stick. He can really stick with the ball in his hands, hit the brakes, and kind of cross over defenders specifically with some really good speed that he can maintain through those spots. Got dynamic reactive footwork when things quickly hit his feet, but he does get tripped up a ton. You don't see great contact balance here either. He doesn't really work through much contact. He's willing to kind of put his shoulder down and fight forward, but there's not a lot of contact balance to his game either. He's not very elusive. There's not a lot of creativity. I don't think there's much jump cutting to his game. And quickly gets away from traffic. He's got a really good sense. Again, his vision's really strong. So ball and over routes, you got him in the field. Immediately there's traffic. He'll kind of swerve around that immediately just to get out of some of those tough positions. He's just very fast to get upfield. He's going to fight for first downs. He has a good sense of where to get to. There's just not a ton of creativity that comes along with it as well. But there's a controlled footwork to his game. He's really good at setting up creases and tight angles. He really works tight angles well. He'll also show some change of pace with the ball in his hands as well here. And it's because of how fast he can get up to speed, which can really lead to some issues in some of those short area spots when the ball gets in his hands, or if he's got a couple of blocks, because he can run through tight angles really well. He's got those tight cuts that he can get upfield with as a north and south runner. So for me, overall, I don't think that he's great with the ball in his hands, but I think he's slightly above average, and the transition is the biggest part of this, because you'll get some broken plays, which are mainly of he's just out so quickly. As soon as he gets the ball, he's out so quickly and off and running. And the drops that you had alongside that was maybe a couple, but he's out so quickly that typically in those spots, that's where big runs would happen, is he would get a crease and he could go. It makes me think of like being a potential punt returner, where it's like, hey, if I get the ball in your hands, can you just make one move and go? Because that's going to be his game. He's not going to dance and try to shake everybody. He's just going to make one move and get upfield. And I think that's valuable for a punt returner. You think about Khalif, I think that's what more Khalif is. Khalif doesn't dance that often. He kind of just gets upfield and goes. I get that same vibe from Lovett. I could see where the Lions could see some Khalif Raymond and Dominic Lovett, not only as a receiving option, but especially with the ball in his hands and his willingness to block and size and all those things. A lot of it kind of feels like a carryover here. In terms of being able to get off the line, I think he's got about 3 to 4 ways that he gets off the line. The problem is none of them are overly exaggerated. None of them show a lot of lateral movement. Maybe you could add to that a little bit more, but he's pretty efficient getting off the ball. The biggest issue is dealing with contact. It really slows up his routes. You'll see this also at like the second level with backers and corners. The positive, he's got some dip, he's got some bend, but if guys do get their hands on him cleanly, that does really slow down the release, and it can really impact how the rest of the route develops through that release point. What I like, though, is he gets off the line really quickly. He can attack off coverage in an instant. He's very consistent with his timing off the ball. He's got a great snap count feel. Again, his alignment's really good in these spots. He kind of adjusts the spacing before the snap, gets other guys kind of lined up as well rightly. He's got a loose upper body that can dip and kind of work around traffic early, which can allow him to work in some of those tighter, congested situations, tight splits, put him in a slot, put him right up next to the line where you're almost counting as a tight end. Like, he can dip and kind of roll through some of those spots.
And we've seen him display his ability to pry leverage just by his footwork alone. Again, you're expecting the plant and cut, and then he has those 2 extra steps, and sometimes there's a short little skip step. He'll have just a little bit more nuance at the top of the route.
Off the ball so quickly with quick footwork that he can a lot of times kind of just avoid contact altogether and avoid most of it and get guys in the trail immediately. Some of that dynamic upfield burst. He's got some of that lean early in traffic. Very crafty in terms of the way that he can kind of change pace into his release as well. The footwork can be very crafty. It can be very sudden. It's a lot of short area movement, but it can be very crafty in the setup. He ready hands for the crossover. I don't think his hands are always that efficient because I don't think his technique's always great. See some shoulder kind of nods to get guys off him when they're trying to get on his hip. And you also see there's some ready hands when he kind of works the crossover to kind of swipe down. But for the most part, I think that could be improved. Just the way that he does it. And he's also not really built to hold guys off. But that being said, he could probably dial in a little more consistency with where he's actually connecting guys with his hands. That way there's less of it, because at the next level, he's going to get punched a lot if you put him on the ball. So I would think that could be dialed in and improved upon a little bit more. But the single step quickness is a problem. He also uses a straight speed release, which is effective. He has a little bit of like a mini skip release. It's very short and skip release that quickly gets him into the route, causes a little bit of delay, but that's really all he needs to get going. He'll use that a lot of times on like his vertical routes where he can just kind of shorten up a skip release. Doesn't really get guys to overset that often off the ball. There's not a lot of that. He might get like a step or a delay and then he can get out, but he doesn't really get guys to lunge. You're not going to get guys leaning off the ball with the way that he gets off the line, with how short everything tends to be. To me, his release package is a little bit more limited. It could definitely be more diverse. And again, he's not going to get guys to overset that often off the ball, and dealing with contact can be a problem. But it's enough right now, no doubt, to get going. You saw the speed release was effective against Notre Dame, who tried to get contact on him. I think there's enough here. It's slightly above average. It's not in a great spot. I don't think it ever will be, but it could be potentially more consistent, which could help at the next level, which is the big thing. Just add more consistency to what you're doing now. But there's a ton of diversity and there's a ton of craftiness here. and a lot of change of pace, which can be a little bit difficult to keep up with. And he constantly won't be on the ball either because he's such a movement piece. Even as a wide receiver, he's used off the ball so he can move pre-snap. That's usually what he's probably going to do at the next level as well. That would all make kind of sense here. And that doesn't mean he can't get off the ball. It's just not his best trait. Route running, again, I think he's slightly above average here. I wanted to go higher. Maybe I should have, because I think there's a lot to like. I just think there's little details that just need a little bit of polish, and you'll feel really good about this. Just some small details, especially with his route tree, because I felt like with his route tree, he was pretty dialed in on, he knew how to run his routes. So I want more diversity, more complexity to what he's actually running, because he ran a lot of those same routes. And because of that, I thought he was very polished within the way that he did it. But a lot of times it could kind of look the same. And some of the same issues I thought popped up as a problem there. But what I like is that he really can weave early with this off-man coverage, zone coverage, the way that he presses zone coverage, the way that he'll attach some discipline to that with his eyes as well can really be a problem. Getting behind linebackers, really good spacing for windows over the middle of the field. He does a lot of those little things to create openings, which I think is going to be huge at the next level, especially against zone. The way he plays tight to zone coverage, the discipline that he attaches to that as well. He also snaps his eyes back to the ball suddenly. He's very quick to get eyes on the quarterback when working hitches and curls and little spot routes underneath and kind of settling in again, not fading in those spots, which I like as well. He doesn't really fade in zone coverage. He's got that fast feet and lean. He can kind of work around traffic in coverage as well, really pry leverage. You'll see this in not press, but not completely off man either, but in kind of a base alignment where he can deal with corners in terms of he can pry leverage. He has a nice ability to kind of attack a field, change up the way that he approaches cornerbacks where he can really pry leverage early. Now, I think that he needs to be more consistent at how close he actually gets in those spots to press cornerbacks a little bit further. At times, especially on the vertical routes, what he'll do is he'll snap those routes too early when he gets upfield. It allows corners to get on top of the route and then just kind of shut it down. It doesn't give as much space as he could potentially create. But like slants and things underneath, I think he does a much better job of being much more proactive, pressing those a little bit more aggressively than separating off it, because he just tends to snap those off a little bit too early for me specifically.
And I always like the nuance in how he pushes his routes vertically, like when he'll make sure that he creates space for himself by pressing inside to open up back so he can get back on the line that he started on originally.
I love the footwork that he uses underneath, the way that he creates space specifically. He plays stack routes really well, so you get him in kind of two-man route concepts where you also have really good pacing to it, where he can kind of settle in. He can slow down, speed up. He's not a one-pace runner at all, which is I love. One of my favorite parts of him as a route runner is the way that he'll kind of set up things. Now, he can get caught rounding routes, which is a big problem, especially when you think about when he gets guys in the trail coverage. He'll get caught rounding through those routes a little bit more often than not. That tends to be a problem, especially when you're working some of those deeper sinking cuts, right? Where especially if it's like level 2, where it's a little bit more vertical push downfield than say just like a 3-yard out route. When he gets to those spots, or a quick slant, when he gets to those spots, that's where you'll tend to see he really tries to rely on his footwork. But the problem with that becomes that he doesn't bend incredibly well or sink incredibly well. So you'll see that he can get a little bit rounded. And also, once he gets guys in trail, he doesn't sustain that very well. He tends to get a little bit loose. He tends to break a little bit loose as he's kind of working through it. He really can weave, and at the same time, he can get back on kind of the flat line. So say he's trying to work a seam, he can kind of break around and get back onto it, but he allows himself to not always play towards that flat line, which allows guys to start to undercut. He really allows recovery angles on like in breakers and second level routes, which needs to be dialed in, because he'll win early and then allow guys back into the play. And I think he could be better at not allowing guys back in play. Sometimes it's a good play by the corner, but I think he allows that just a little bit too much. But I like the vertical push discipline that he plays with, the very sudden, the top of the route. He can really freeze defensive backs. I mean, it's a little hesitation. It's a subtle where it looks like he's going to set up to break, right? You'll get kind of footwork, which says break, like 1, 2, plant, and he's out. You'll get that, but then there'll be like an extra step to it. And it's just a very short, it's kind of choppy. He'll also do like mini skips up onto a defender, which just forces them to kind of stop, and they're not really sure when he's going to break, and then he snaps it off very quickly. Again, he's got the knee flex. He bursts out of those spots. He controls his footwork really well in those spots for the most part. You rarely see those things break loose. So because of that control, that pacing, it's really difficult for guys to sync up. It's unorthodox. It's like an unorthodox timing. It's difficult for defenders to constantly sync up, and constantly he's cutting off and dragging in front of guys underneath. So that happens a lot. That happens a lot where he's just stepping in front of defenders. It's really difficult to see guys jumping his route. I don't think he works through the mesh really well. Some of that's ankle bend. I just don't think he does it incredibly well. Again, he's willing to kind of set up his teammates, try to set like a pick to get guys out of the way. But I don't think he works through those incredibly loosely. They feel a little bit like a little more difficult for him to kind of slither through. So that leads to some problem. There's just extra footwork that's necessary there. A little bit of a rise. It's not overly exaggerated, but there is a little bit of a rise at times. The sync of his routes, which allows guys to connect back with him as well, especially if guys are riding on his hip, there's a little bit of a rise to it, so it can kind of just allow guys to even make it more contested, and then he can really they can cut off like a side where he's trying to cut back to. That can lead to some problems. As guys are able to ride his hip throughout the rep, they can really make it difficult for the rep to separate a little bit later on, trying to get guys off of him. That legit long speed, we saw it against Texas. Like, he can legitimately take the top off, and he holds his eyes forward when he's kind of working into those routes that need a vertical push to snap back downhill. He does tend to hold his eyes really well vertical in those spots. Route tree wasn't overly complex. I did think that you were watching a slightly above average route runner with some probably just limitations there. Probably certain routes that you're just not going to want to run with him as much, like deep comebacks maybe, but he tends to kind of make it work. And there's a lot of polish to what he does now with little things that could probably make it even better. And then to add on top of that, if we go to the route savviness aspect, with like the creativity that he can create, there's a lot of things that I think that is savvy. I think he's got very good route savvy. I talked about when we drafted him, kind of the head movement at the top of the route, how shifty that was. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of nuance. There's an unorthodox feel to it, like I touched on. There's a lot of that through the stem of the route, which is a lot to do with, a lot of change of pace, very adaptive. It's not just like one speed running through. So he's got a lot of savvy to his game. A little bit too much in certain areas, but he's got a lot of that. Keeps his eyes on a linebacker before he ends up looking back for the ball when he's working the seams in the middle of the field. That way they can't kind of undercut or get in the way of some of those passing lanes. Like how he immediately finds the next defender to look off. You'll see this at the safety position a lot. He passed the linebacker. He'll find a safety, try to look those guys off. He always has someone that he's selling his eyes to. He's not just using head movement to use it. There's always a reason that he's using the head movement that he used to kind of shake guys. And he typically finds a target, kind of locks onto him, and tries to shake those players out of their position. He's had some nasty reps because of that, which finds a lot of success in some of the ability to create separation, especially against zone coverage. Hands incredibly well, especially when you get him like through the second level. It's a little bit more of kind of a dip and a void, but I think he could potentially improve the way that he uses his hands. He could also improve that at the catch point. So can have late eyes to kind of feel when he's open. Like, this is a problem where, especially early in the year, showed up better at the end of the season, I think, where like openings would pop up in zone, but he wouldn't find the quarterback soon enough. He kind of run to where he's supposed to go before he actually found the quarterback. I thought late in the year he's much more proactive, but that was a problem specifically early this past season. Very active to kind of find spacing as a route runner. So for me, I think he's a very savvy route runner. And then the other two categories that I really want to focus on here was his blocking. And I do like his blocking. I think that he's a good blocker because, to me, he runs his feet through contact. He's willing to step in. He'll do a lot of different assignments. He'll pin block. He'll kind of crack down on safeties. He'll do a lot of different assignments as a blocker. He'll block in space. He seems genuinely excited when he can kind of help springboard a big run. He's not great at keeping guys in front of him. He tends to lunge a little bit as a blocker. He also can play with wide hands, which could lead to some holding issues, but he'll get himself well outside with some longer arms that can get him into some problems as well. But he's willing to lead on screens. He'll flip his hips and kind of cut guys off on the backside of plays. His aggression is a plus, but it's not outstanding. He's not like overly like crazy as a blocker, but he is willing to get downfield and give some support. Like, I think the blocking is good. It could be better, but it's good right now, and that's something you're going to like. And then also, when you think about his ability to track the football, this scenario I think he's good as well. And this leads to some potential upside as a pass catcher just in general, because he does track the ball with a lot of talent here. He's very fast to track. He's very fast to track the ball and find the ball, which allows him to make some adjustments, though sometimes I think he can be late to making adjustments, which is a problem. He's got the body control to do it. He's not overly explosive when the ball's in the air, which is a problem. And he's also not super lengthy as well, or big hand, none of those things. But what he does do is he does have the body control to kind of shift the way that he's corrected quickly to get himself into spots to actually make a play on the football. Really good feel in traffic. He knows when kind of players are around him. Now, again, taking his eyes off the ball can be an issue, but he has a really good feel when he's working through traffic. I would like to see him kind of bend his routes back to the quarterback more, where like he snaps it off and then he kind of pulls himself back to the quarterback more than he does right now, especially over the middle of the field. I think he could kind of settle in more so to those openings than he did. That could have some improvement there, but he's got that fluid body control, contact at the catch point. He's very willing to fight through contact as well as a small receiver. He plays with some stockiness to him where it doesn't seem to phase him whatsoever to kind of just try to bully dudes. There could be better of a process to it, but ultimately, like, he's going to fight through contact, and typically you would like to see those go in his direction. I saw one OPI this past year, but doesn't clear out defenders incredibly well at the catch point, but he finds the ball in contested spots. He does mistime his jumps, which is an issue. We saw a great one at the end of the year, but there was inconsistency with timing up, like when to leave the ground, those little hops. Too much of that could be a problem, but also when he needs to jump, just mistiming it. Sometimes just mistimes how he gets squared to the ball when he's working screens. He really tries to work his body control in the spot where he's getting like, okay, his full body into this. Outside of when he's running through the football, that'll get him problems. When he's spotted up, he really does a nice job of squaring himself up, making himself a big target, and improving the potential opportunity to catch the ball, because he's very good when the ball's on his frame. So he gets his frame a lot of times to the ball. That focus in traffic through contested spots, the work over a shoulder focus, the way that he fights through contact. To me, I think he's got good tracking ability, and this leads to a lot of upside. So for me, there's a toughness to it. I think he's a very tough receiver, very good toughness. He's a plus playmaker as well. He's not elite here, but he's got some playmaking to him because he's so fast. He plays with a good play speed as well. good to very good play speed, in my opinion, is great because he shows that he's fast, but he also plays fast in a lot of ways, with a lot of different change of pace, a lot of tempo. The body control is a plus, and he tended to be pretty clutch. Even Kirby said it when he first got there, like third downs, he's a big piece, and he has a sense for those kind of like big moments, even though he wasn't like dominant in those spots this past year because he didn't get that many opportunities. I felt that he was a pretty clutch piece when I watched him. So overall, you'll see the grades on the screen. I think Dominic Lovett I think there's a lot in his game. I think he clearly looks like a Khalif Raymond potential replacement. I think he's going to be a good gunner at the next level. I don't just think he is a gunner. I think he's a good gunner. He's tough to deal with off the line. He's tough to get hands on. He's tough to run with. It's hard for guys to run with him down the field. And he shows like, okay, he can track the football. So I think he's got a lot of really good gunner traits. I think he's better than Isaac Tesla as a gunner from what I've seen so far. It wouldn't surprise me if he was our starting gunner on special teams immediately. But I think as a pass catcher, how you want to see how diverse he can get the route tree one, and then make sure his hands are more consistent. Have to dial in some techniques things there. But if he comes down in the preseason, he's not dropping passes because that'll be a big thing to get snaps early. He could roll pretty quickly here. He could find some roles pretty quickly. I don't think we'll see a ton of him in his rookie season outside of special teams. I wonder about punt returner upside, maybe kick returner, but maybe more so punt returner, finding a seam and getting up and going. But there's definitely talent. And the guy can separate against a lot of players. He separated against everybody that he played against in the SEC. It's in some form or another. It's just how deep can we get this route tree? And is he an upgrade over what we have? And right now, it'd be hard to say that. But eventually, could he be a player that gets a legitimate amount of snaps? Could he fit into that Khalif role? I definitely think that's on the table. And I actually think there's more there than that because I think that his ability to separate actually speaks a little bit higher in that sense. I think he's got a little bit more, and he definitely has a lot of juice. So that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.